your distinguished colleagues for inviting me to this retreat and for the warm welcome accorded me since my arrival in Nigeria, especially since my arrival in Port Harcourt. I thank you also for the opportunity to engage in these deliberations, to learn from the fountain of knowledge and experience of this distinguished gathering, and to share my own views. I had looked forward to the participation also of President Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, a distinguished world leader who regrettably is not able to be here, but who has contributed so much to the development of South Africa and to the advancement of global peace and security and international cooperation. We in Africa owe an enormous debt to President Mbeki for the extraordinary leadership in power in South Africa, for his conceptualization of the African Renaissance, and the establishment of continental institutions for the promotion of good governance, among his legacy to Africa. Since his retirement, he has been just as busy. His tireless quest for peaceful solutions to African conflicts, and the enhancement of accountability and transparency in regional as well as global economic governance remains outstanding to our continent. As a Liberian, let me also recall that it was through the leadership of President Obasanjo and President Mbeki in 2003, the Liberian conflict was brought to an end when the two leaders leading a high-powered team were able to persuade President Charles Taylor to resign and depart Liberia, thereby providing an environment for the final resolution of the conflict, putting Liberia on a course of peace and post-conflict reconstruction. We Liberians owe both leaders a debt of gratitude. I want to also congratulate this august body, Mr. Chairman, for taking time off to reflect on some of the critical areas of governance and development in Nigeria, particularly at the level of state governance. The strength of Nigeria as a federation lies not only in good governance at the federal level, but also at the level of state and local governance. The federal system of government works well when there are strong institutions of governance at all levels of government, and when interaction amongst them works well, especially in the delivery of public goods and services to the people. There are always challenges in the relationships between federal and state governments. Contentions over jurisdictional responsibilities and prerogatives, resource allocation and budgets, among others, will always exist, and solutions to these might not always satisfy all parties. What is most important, however, is that there should always exist a spirit of cooperation between federal and state governments and a willingness to find solutions together. Quite frequently, adequate solutions to contentions about jurisdictional issues can be found when the search for solutions is guided by the principle of subsidiarity. Solutions to contentions about resource allocations are guided by principle of commensurability, such that the nature and magnitude of the service to be provided at the level of the state have bearing on the nature and magnitude of the resources allocated for the provision of the service. Success in addressing the challenges between federal and state governments can involve high transaction costs. Sometimes the level of transaction costs is as high as that needed for confidence building. But if there is a spirit of cooperation, the environment for reaching understanding will exist. Mr. Chairman, I am not telling you anything you do not already know. As governors, a good portion of your time is taken up in building consensus among diverse constituencies and negotiating with the federal government to reach productive outcomes to challenges. This is what governance entails, reaching common understandings about how to address dilemmas and challenges of development. Mr. Chairman, the issue under consideration at this session is of critical importance to successful public service. Preparation for transitioning out of public service and the question of the quality of life we would like to live after public service are issues which should be considered by all public office holders, while they are preparing to hold public office or shortly after they would have been installed in public office. If we carefully think about what quality of life we would want to live after office, the answer to that question will help us shape the quality of service we provide while in office. I submit to you that most, if not all, public office holders would like to live lives after office in dignity and with relevance. Concerns about security, especially physical and financial security, and about maintaining social standing and public respect and approbation are key elements of the concern about living life in dignity. Concerns about a relevant life after office often has to do with a life that gives us a productive niche and appreciation in society. How do we ensure that we transition out of public office to a life in dignity and relevance after office? Mr. Chairman, my personal experience here is guiding in part my views on this question. In September 1990, at the peak of the Liberian Civil War, I was chosen to serve as interim president. Although under conditions of hardship, I functioned both as ceremonial as well as substantive head of the government. This included all the trappings of the office. In March 1994, a new transitional government was formed and I stepped down, returning to life as a private citizen. How did I cope with my new circumstance? No retinue of state security, assistants, advisors, no bulletproof limousine, and no crowds attending my every appearance. My preparation for exiting office began at the time when I was inducted into office. And let me share with you how I prepared for this life after office. And I do recommend some of this to all leaders. First, when appointed or elected, it is important to see public service as a privilege. We must see public service as a privilege, and because it is a privilege, we should be appreciative of the opportunity given us to serve, and we must be humbled by this opportunity. Second, we must remind ourselves every day that public service is an assignment and not an entitlement. We must be mindful that as an assignment, public service is of time-bound duration. We enter, we serve, we exit. Third, we must be mindful also that others are to follow us, and most often we would have had predecessors. As office holders, we are in a chain of actors, and we have a responsibility to build upon the good things that were done by our predecessors and to leave our footprints for our successors to follow. One of the personal challenges in holding public office, especially elected office, is the temptation to condemn what our predecessors have done and to seek to present ourselves as the first ever to do the right thing. We are often too reluctant to give due credit to our predecessors. This orientation does not enhance development. It does not help us to build from strength to strength. However, moreover, it breeds enmity and an adversarial relationship between incumbents and predecessors. It is not healthy for life after office. Fourth, it is good for us to come to public office with a vision. It is even more helpful if that vision is to manage public affairs in a way that changes things for the better. By developing and using human resources of the society in a manner that is inclusive of all, including former leaders, our predecessors. An agenda for transformation cannot be implemented by the government alone. The stature and experience of former leaders who leave office in good standing can prove invaluable in promoting development objectives at all levels of governance, where human and material resources need to be mobilized and deployed. Fifth, while in office, it is prudent to select and undertake a legacy project from the broader development agenda. Undertake such a project and complete it. People do remember leaders who make a positive difference in their lives. Projects advancing education, healthcare, roads, housing, waterworks, and sanitation are among projects that make a difference in the lives of people and serve as a legacy of our leaders. While all these steps would contribute to preparing a conducive environment for transitioning out of office and to a life after office, there is need to ensure that retirement packages are formulated as part of the transition process. These packages are more likely to be supported by the population when they are prepared as part of the overall governing process with the advice of experts and in an open and transparent manner. They can be resisted by the public when they are perceived as acts of desperation by outgoing incumbents, or when seen to be unreasonable featherbedding. An expert team can be hired to study the circumstances of life after office and provide some guidelines, some guidance for enactment of appropriate legislation. This could be a project for the secretariat of this forum to undertake. In this way, individuals are spared the arguments and the insinuations which in themselves can detract from public respect as one leaves office. So it is better to institutionalize the process of determining the retirement package of outgoing leaders. There are a number of areas in which, Mr. Chairman, leaders can be very active when they have left office. Allow me to discuss one or two of them. Many African countries today are struggling to perfect their decentralization programs. There is a lot that can be offered by former governors of this country who have deep experience in operating, governing in multi-level governance arrangements to help African countries, such as my own, that are struggling today to put in place processes of decentralization and multiple levels of government. I should also say that African universities can benefit from the experience and insights of former governors about the management of state affairs in a multiple system of governance in the African context. My sense, Mr. Chairman, is the highly competent technical staff of the National Governors Forum and others associated with them can be tasked to put forward realistic and implementable recommendations. There are numerous examples of how former African leaders, not only presidents and heads of government, but also judges, parliamentarians, and heads of economic and educational institutions, have been able to assist in the promotion of local, national, and regional development initiatives, mediate conflicts, engage in post-conflict peace building and recovery, and socioeconomic development. For example, several retired judges from African countries serve as members of regional and global tribunals. Former parliamentarians serve as election observers and advisors in the orientation of new parliamentarians in both their own as well as other African countries. Former governors need to be amongst their ranks. Mr. Chairman, permit me now, in closing, to say to you that this conference will provide an invaluable opportunity for exchange of ideas, and indeed, I am convinced that peer learning is a very effective form of learning. It's a very effective form of capacity building. And I trust that by 2013, your exchanges will be broader, involving all of your colleagues, and it will be equally rewarding. Thank you very much.